Welcome to Spotlight on New England, where we delve into the diverse and inspiring stories of pastors shaping communities across the New England area. Join us as we unravel their journeys, wisdom, and the unique experiences of these spiritual leaders who are making a profound impact in this region. Get ready for insightful conversations that transcend the pulpit and bring you closer to the heart of each pastor. Good afternoon and welcome to Spotlight on New England. We are in Providence, Rhode Island at Bethel A.M.E. Church, where the Reverend Howard M. Jenkins Jr. is its pastor. And we are glad to see you today, Pastor Jenkins. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Presiding?
Great. Thank you for making time for us to visit with you and to hear some of your story, your journey in your professional career as well as your vocation in ministry. Share with me, if you would, a little bit about your employment prior to and along with the time, actually, that you've been in ministry.
I accepted the call to minister in 1995. Prior to that time, I was employed with General Dynamics Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut. And I have held several leadership positions in that particular role, several management positions. I was a supervisor of shipbuilding, manager of design, manager of human resources, manager of special projects, manager of career development. And it's really given me a solid foundation in regards to working and understanding organizational structure and work with people. I enjoy submarine building. Submarine design and construction is a passion. But the uniqueness of that particular job, I also enjoy work with people.
Yeah. If I could, how did you come to submarine building construction and all of the things that go along with it?
So I graduated from Virginia State University in Petersburg, Virginia. My major was design, and I ended up co-oping with General Motors in Flint, Michigan, my sophomore year. And I actually worked with them from January to August for 2 consecutive years. And as a result of that design experience with General Motors, I stayed with them for an additional 3 years, but I wanted to relocate. And I had a friend that co-opted with General Dynamics, and so he shared the opportunities at General Dynamics. And so I relocated in '87 to Connecticut, where I was introduced to submarine design. And so the reality is that submarine design or submarines, I had no background in it. And so it was definitely a new, interesting product to work on. And so I just fell in love with the product. And so that's pretty much what brought me to Connecticut in '87. And so I worked with General Dynamics for 31 years. And I've been relocated a couple of times. I relocated in Virginia for 4 years and relocated in Rhode Island, but I spent most of my time in Groton, Connecticut.
And so even for maybe about half of the time then that you were working with General Dynamics, you were pastor of this church. Is that about right?
I would say probably about a third of the time, because I was actually a member of Bethel, New Haven for 16 years before I relocated to Virginia, took an assignment in Virginia. And so when I was assigned to Bethel, Providence, my first pastorate, that was in 2010. And it's funny because I'd gone to Charles Street or St. Paul, but I'd never gone to Bethel, Providence. I was always going south because I was Bethel, New Haven. And so it was interesting when I received the appointment and Bishop Norris said, well, you're going to Bethel, Providence. And so I was like, so where's Bethel, Providence? But it was only 15 minutes from the house. So it was a blessing. And so while I was driving an hour, I had a shorter commute. But it's interesting how God works.
Can you share, because your story of how you became pastor is very interesting as well. Can you share a little about that?
So it's very interesting because I had just come back from Virginia. I had spent 4 years in Virginia with General Dynamics. And so when I came back, annual conference, Bishop Norris said, you know, we have churches here, but we don't have persons that want to pastor. And I'm not going to say I did it. I'm going to say the Holy Spirit did it. And I stood up and said, you know, I can pastor. I can do just as good a job as anyone else here. And so everybody sort of looked at me like, who does this guy think he is? Mm-hmm. And so when I received the appointment, I was elated. Can I say that I ever wanted to pastor? I know Reverend Greer and I had this conversation, and he had asked me probably a couple years prior before I realized. He said, would you like to pastor? I said, well, you know, if I pastor, give me about 50 people that really love the Lord, and I'll be happy. Mm-hmm. And so God has given me that. Mm-hmm. I mean, so God has given me the desires of my heart, and so fast forward, I was bivocational for 8 years, mm-hmm. and so I spent a lot of time with the congregation. But the reality is, if you would have asked me what's going on in the community, I couldn't tell you, mm-hmm. Because I would spend 14 hours at work, do church, do the administration, do the pastoring, but knew very little about the community. Mm-hmm. And it was actually after New England the Providence area hosted annual conference. Mm-hmm. I got up that morning, the last day I was in the hotel, and God spoke to me. He said, it's time to do my work. Mm-hmm. He said, I've given you literally the desires of your heart. Your kids have gone to school. You financially are secure, so do my work. Mm-hmm. And so I told Teresa, I said, you know, I'm going to retire. And we had talked about it, but just, you know, in conversation. And so I immediately made that decision and shared it with my director, and they were a little surprised. And but I said, you know, I'll give you plenty of time. This was April, and I actually retired the end of September. Mm-hmm. And that has been a blessing. Mm-hmm. It has been a blessing because pastoring is more than just a congregation. Absolutely. Because what I find is that pastoring goes beyond, and you're actually touching lives of other people outside of the walls of the church. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think we, the congregants and the pastor, focuses so much on what's inside the walls that we miss the blessings that God has for us outside of the walls. And because of the pandemic, that even pushed us out even more.
Right. I want to come back to that, mm-hmm. but would you share with me just briefly, if you could, the process? You mentioned that the Providence area hosted annual conference, mm-hmm. in yes. 2018, I believe, mm-hmm. it was. How did that come about? Mm-hmm. The abbreviated version, and also what has that done for us in this annual conference?
Reverend Kevin Taylor, my very good friend, he was new to the conference, and we started talking, and he said, you know, have we ever, the Providence area churches, have we ever hosted? I said, no, but I would like to. He said, so let's do it. He said, so we sort of did some spy work. And so first we got a feel for Bishop Ingram, if it was possible. And so he gave us like, really? He said, well, come back and talk to me.
And what's significant about that?
The significance is that we are smaller churches.
There you go. Mm-hmm.
And because we're smaller churches, we have never hosted, since I've been in the Providence area, an annual conference. Mm-hmm. And so our thought was bring together all the churches and we do it collectively. Mm-hmm. And that way it's not a lot on any particular pastor or any particular church. Mm-hmm. And our thought was, let's do it at a hotel. Mm-hmm. And so it's one-stop location, everything is there. And so we didn't really explain that to Bishop Ingram, but he was like, if you're going to do it, you got to show me the numbers. You got to show me the plan. And Reverend Taylor is very good in organization. Mm-hmm. I have those skills as well, but we complement each other. So we sort of put something together, a rough draft together that we felt comfortable presenting. We actually presented to pastors, and we tried to put the numbers in a manner that, according to that particular church, what they were capable of doing. So it'd been inclusive. We even presented to component heads, mm-hmm. So that we could get their buy-in. And so everyone we talked to mostly they were supportive. And so when we presented to Bishop Ingram, he took a look at it, he thought about it, and he gave us a nod. The abbreviated story, he gave us a nod. And we are very pleased, the Providence area is very pleased with the outcome. The annual conference, we feel, was a success. It exceeded many persons' expectation, even ours. The only regret that I have is that Reverend Taylor was moved, and he wasn't able to see the everything come to the fruition of it. And he shared with me, he said, you know, on annual day, he said, I cried because he had seen everything come together, and he just felt good about it. But at the same time, he wasn't part of that.
Right.
But in that, I think what really came out of that was relationship building, not just with pastors, but with congregations. Because we met on a regular basis, we would alternate churches. We would make sure that we have the committees set up. And I think there was a bond that was established that wasn't as solidified as it was or could have been through that annual conference. And I think there was a sense of respect from pastors that the smaller churches have the capabilities to also be engaged and take on larger projects, annual conference, whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. And also that every church contributed in some way.
Yes.
Even those who may not have been able to contribute as much financially were able to participate as on the various committees.
Right.
And then I believe we had about a year of prayer, you know, of intercession and prayer for God's blessings, you know, on our annual conference. And the other takeaway, Reverend Jenkins, is that we've adopted that as our model from that point forward. That was the way annual conference has been hosted here in New England.
Yes. And so that sort of makes us feel good.
Absolutely.
In regards to, and we get the questions when folks are planning, you know, how did you do this? How did you do that? And I think the big surprise, the big surprise and the takeaway was the response from the annual conference. We exceeded our expectations in regards to hotel space. And that also allowed us to have a little more flexibility in gaining some perks, which even made it better for leadership, Episcopal leadership, and you, presiding elder, and Brother Ed. And so that becomes important when you're able to have that flexibility, do some things that you hadn't planned, but God just opened the window to allow that to happen.
Yeah, and again, you know, a model that has carried forward, and it was a very, very successful annual conference, well attended, well planned, and executed. And we thank you for the leadership that you provided in that season.
Thank you for your leadership.
You began to speak about the difference that has taken place in ministry now that you're retired from General Bolt. And you also alluded to the impact of the pandemic. Would you share about those areas, please?
Well, the pandemic gave me a different view of ministry. But before that happened, my wife and I, Teresa, we caught COVID. And out of that experience, Teresa, she wrote a book. For me, it became more of an experience in ministry. It became a new journey. That God.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, you all were among the first in our district to contract COVID, along with Reverend Viola.
Right. So and so that experience actually humbled me. It also humbled Teresa, and the piece that came out of it was, God, in my perspective, God intentionally humbled me to do His work, and as a result, I was really able to do ministry. I was able to fulfill my passion by touching more than just a few, but touching a large number. I'm also president of the Ministers Alliance of Rhode Island, and so we are constantly talking to governmental leadership, city leadership. And during the pandemic, it really opened the door in regards to churches. And so governmental leadership and city leadership began to ask questions, what are some of the things that the churches can do to help? And my opinion was, we are not open, but we can be open. And so it really allowed the churches to do more than we would ever have imagined. The church partnered with DCYF, where families would have more flexibility to go to different places. That wasn't available at the time. And as a result, we were able to use our space in our fellowship hall for families to come and see their children from DCYF. And so that worked out very well. We were able to use the sanctuary and downstairs for vaccinations. We were able to coordinate with the city. There was a press conference that I was involved with in regards to an issue. And one of the things that it was the number of Black and brown people being vaccinated. And so after that interview, the Governor McKee, asked me to his office. And he said, Pastor Jenkins, I heard what you were saying, but are the numbers like that? I said, yes, they are. And so he called in his staff. He said, let's look at the numbers. And the numbers, what the state was doing was using a whole number. We have vaccinated, we'll say, 500,000 people. But when you look at our Black and brown community, it was like 1%. And so my appeal to him, and with a coalition of other community leaders, was that, will you allow us to use the Dunkin' Donuts Center so that we can touch the Black and brown community and change the narrative? Because the narrative out there is that we didn't believe in vaccinations. And I was part of that narrative. But after COVID, I began to look at it a lot different. And so we established what we call faith and science. And so through faith and science, we were able to say, you know what? We recognize all of the things that happened in our past as Blacks, as African Americans, but the science, we can trust the science a lot better now. And so out of that conversation with the governor, he opened the door to a lot of different, he allowed us to use buses, which they paid for. He gave us a staff that we could use. He gave us his staff that we could use. And we vaccinated over 7,000 people in 2 weekends.
Bethel, Providence.
Bethel, Providence, and other faith leaders. We planned it. We put it in motion, and it was a blessing. It was a blessing to see lives being changed. It also shifted the narrative that particularly African Americans weren't getting vaccinated. And so what we learned out of that, it wasn't that African Americans weren't getting vaccinated, it was access, having access to vaccinations, being able to navigate the website for the state. And there was a lot of concerns that came out of that. So we were able to talk to a lot of folks, change some things within the city and also within the structure of the government, and it worked out well.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I believe you were interviewed by MSNBC as a result of your work here.
Yeah. So and that was an honor. So that was I appreciate that as well.
You've worked closely with 2 governors. Your previous governor, who's now over Commerce, and then this current governor.
Yes.
And I think you've done some workforce projects and
workforce development. Matter of fact, I have a meeting next week. Amazon is building a facility in Johnston, and I talked with the governor's chief of staff probably about a year ago, and so matter of fact, he called me last week. He said, Pastor Jenkins, we talked about this off and on. He said, would you like to meet with the mayor of Johnston? Because what my proposal is that we need to make sure that those in the Black and brown community are getting these jobs. And so the plan is to sit down with him, the mayor of Johnston, so that I can understand the program. We can get in front of the hiring process and make sure our community gets involved in it.
Absolutely. So often we are cut out of what's taking place if we're not at the table. And what other projects are you working on within the city of Providence and the state of Rhode Island?
We just finished the M.A.N.E program, which is a recovery program. That particular program is for substance abuse and I say that tongue in cheek because what I find is that, you know, there are those that have some type of habits that they're trying to break loose. And so the way this program is set up, it's a faith-based program. Whereas if there's something that's holding you back, I'll use it that way. You know, you might want to shop too much, or whatever the case may be. I try not to put so much emphasis on substance abuse, but if there is a habit that an individual wants to break, because the principles of the A.M.E program also talks about citizenship, talks about finance and budget, so it talks about a varied amount of things. And so this is a 22-week program that's actually was started at Yale University, and New Haven is the church that New Haven is the city that has been very much, it has influenced and shaped this particular program, and this is their 5th year. Mm-hmm. The state of Rhode Island was introduced to it during COVID, and I sat in on a meeting at Rhode Island College, and I felt that was a very interesting program. About a year and a half or 2 years later, it came here. It took another year for the program to come into existence, and so we Bethel Providence were the first church in the Rhode Island state of Rhode Island to complete the program. Mm-hmm. We graduated 7 out of a number of 10 individuals that participate in the program, and it opened the church's eyes because we trained facilitators, and we had our trained facilitators as well, and it gave us a different perspective of how we are to look at God's people. And so I think it was more than just a benefit to those persons that participated in the program. It was a benefit to the church as well.
Will you continue that program, another cycle beginning?
So the second cohort has started. We already have 5 within our congregation who wants to be facilitators, which is a blessing. And so we will be hosting the facilitator training on the 15th, 16th, and 17th of March. And the goal is to do more outreach to other churches, really trying to get churches involved in doing things that are impactful and supportive of the community, not just a community, but the community universal.
And so we've heard as we've gone along from many pastors that they view the role of the pastor and the role of the church as being beyond the 4 walls. And clearly that's your perspective as well.
It is. And what it does, indirectly, it's an evangelism path because you're meeting people, people are meeting you. It breaks racial barriers because where there was a hesitancy, we had more people coming to this church that say, you know, I always wanted to come into this church. And it's such a beautiful church. I just feel the warmth here. And so it really allows people to see a different side of the church, and it allows people to say that, as I say, the doors are always open. So we as pastors have a multifaceted responsibility to our congregation, to our community, and most importantly, to God.
Is there anything more about your community engagement or ministry here at Bethel that you'd like to share?
I feel that the ministry outside has brought the ministry inside. It has caused us as a congregation and community to look at how ministry can be different. Because we got involved through the pandemic of feeding the hungry, literally thousands of people, and so the church was engaged with doing that and excited about doing it. I'm part of, I became a commissioner a little less than a year ago in regards to health and equity. And so that has introduced some things to me that I can introduce to the church. I've been appointed as the chaplain for RITS, which is a Rhode Island training school, which is a detention center for youth between 13 to 18. And so I'm working now on a mentoring program that brings that into the church, into the community, whereas we can become involved in making an impact with our youth, which is needed very much so.
And you go there?
I go there 2 or 3 times a week, but because there is a need, trying to get others, and I'll be the first to admit, you know, I was not as receptive because that was out of my comfort zone, and so Reverend Teresa said, you should be doing this. And so I said, I know I should, but but I've been doing this for like 7 months now, and you establish a relationship, you get a different perspective of young people, and they're on a journey, and so you can share, but most important, you can listen to their story. And it was funny. I was there yesterday, and one of the young men said, Pastor Jenkins, you disappointed me. I said, what'd I do? He said, you didn't come last week. I said, man, I've been busy. I said, but I'm coming tomorrow. And so you begin to see how the young people, we have a perception that is not clear until we engage.
Yeah.
And so it becomes extremely important that we engage, particularly with our young people.
Absolutely. I'm going to back into this one. Over the last year, within several months actually, you had a significant loss in your family, the passing of your father. And how are you adjusting? And if you would care to share any challenges that you may be experiencing currently?
Well, so I'll back up a little bit. Alzheimer's is something that, I knew very little about. And because I'm involved in the community, I got a call from a gentleman, Dr. Williams. And he said, I'm looking for someone in the community to lead this effort in Alzheimer's. And I said, what? I said, tell me about it. And so he shared it with me. And the more he shares, like, my dad is going through this. And he traveled from North Carolina and gave a presentation. And what he did, he introduced the Ministers Alliance, myself and the Ministers Alliance, to Butler Hospital. And so when you think of Butler Hospital, particularly in this city, we think of mental illness. But Butler Hospital does a lot of different things in regards to brain health. And so we, the Ministers Alliance and Bethel, we end up getting involved with the Alzheimer's program. And here was the piece that sort of turned the switch for me. We as a people don't get involved in studies. And this particular program was called the U.S. Pointer Study. And Rhode Island was one of 5 states that were involved in this. And the point was to get more people of color to become involved in the study. And what I'm learning as I look at things and different programs, we as a people pretty much have that hands off. We don't want, because we have a history that is difficult to erase in regards to being abused through science. But this Alzheimer's helped me to navigate with my father. As his health began to decline, there was support out there in regards to resources that I never would have known about, never would have asked about, just sort of take it all in and do what we do. As a people, as a culture, I feel that we want to take care of our parents. But the reality is that we are not out there alone. And we as a society, particularly as a Black society, need to recognize there are resources out there that can help us. As my father's health declined, that was very difficult because both my parents are around the same age. And a lot of that responsibility had fallen on my mother, and she couldn't do it. And so I found myself traveling back and forth to help out my dad. My daughter relocated just probably about 9 months ago to help out with my father before he passed away, and now with my mom. And so it became a family effort. But it's tough. It's tough on the family. It's tough on the pastor. But the congregation was very embracing. They recognized what was going on, and pandemic taught us some things. You can do a Zoom worship service, and I would spend a couple of weeks in Virginia. Ministers would cover, or whatever the case may be. I would fly back Saturday night and be to church on Sunday, and it really helped. It helps the healing process because I'm still trying to heal from it, but at the same time, when you know that there's support there for you, like yourself, presiding elder, many ministers and congregation, it makes the journey manageable. But now I'm going through this with my mother, and so now it's like deja vu all over again, and so it's like I was thinking this morning, I was like, I gotta go through this all over again. It's a lot. It's a lot. But I recognize that I'm not alone. I know that God's there. I know there's support there. And so that sort of helps. So the Alzheimer's is a piece that not only helped this congregation, but it became a personal story. And we began to hear the stories of others that had to be part of that particular journey. And so that becomes important, because sometimes we have the tendency of holding all this stuff inside and not sharing, and how we can help others to heal, or at least help others to recognize that, they're going through what I went through. And so that becomes important, particularly if we call ourselves a household of faith. We have to sometimes knock down those walls and really be who we are. We got to share some tears sometimes. We got to tell the story sometimes, because that's also part of the healing process, not only for the individual, but it's part of the healing process for the congregation. And what came out of my father's passing, there was a couple of members that say, Pastor Jenkins, I went through the same thing. And, when I heard your father's eulogy, I was like, oh man, tears just came down my eyes, because that's what our family went through. And so we have to make sure that what we're sharing as a church is relevant. We all love Jesus. We all love the Lord. We recognize what we have to do, but at the same time, this journey it's a lot.
We're real people with real lives.
Right.
And oftentimes we are reluctant to share some of the things that are going on with us, but in sharing prayerfully in the community of faith, we find some empathy and sensitivity, and also a lot of support. And your journey, Reverend Jenkins, is impacted by the fact that you're an only child. And so there are not siblings or nieces or nephews, to lean upon, but your immediate family and the community there in Virginia has been outstanding.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has.
Yes.
And so that's a blessing. And that's a result of my parents. My parents have always had good friends. And those friends just rally around to support. And so that helps in regards to things that have to be done. Like today, there were some things going on at home. So I was able to call the nurse that my father had during his time, and she was able to go to the house and check on some things for me. And so it takes a village. It really
yes,
takes
it
a
does.
village. Really.
Yes, it does. All right, Reverend Jenkins, on a lighter note, tell us something that no one really knows about you.
I like riding a motorcycle.
Okay.
I love golf. Don't play it much, but when I can. What else? I want to learn how to scuba dive.
Oh, scuba dive. All right. We can talk to the Hammonds on Reverend Mariama. Yeah, on that one. All right. And if you could name 3 people, living or dead, with whom you'd like to have a conversation.
Malcolm X. And the reason Malcolm X, because there was a transformation in his life, whereas he saw things one way from the beginning, but as he began to open the aperture to people, not just Black people, but people in general, and his faith, people of his faith, there was a transformation that happened. I'm going to sit down with Jesus, prayerfully when I make it to heaven. So, Presiding Elder, I'm gonna say you, and here's why.
And you just got the bonus. Just kidding.
Because I've asked you a couple of times, how do you just preach like that? And you say you study, you put your time in, and you close your eyes, and the words just come out. And it blesses. It don't just bless my heart; it blesses everybody's heart. And
God bless you,
a lot of us talk about it's like it's just the power of the Holy Spirit just comes over you. And so I would like to talk more about your sermon preparation. Bishop Ingram. Bishop Ingram made a large impact on my life. His leadership, how he was able to keep the First District focused on a spiritual path, both him and Reverend Jessica. And I recognize, being a leader is difficult, but what an awesome work he did. And so that would be the third person.
All right, thank you. And lastly, How would you like to be remembered?
Oh, well, some might say Pastor Jenkins is a tough man, and I have expectations, but I would not lead any person down a path that I would not go down, and so I would like to be remembered as someone that had purposeful intentionality. I know it's a double positive. Uh, be true to God, and not perfect by any means necessary. I made mistakes and will continue to make mistakes. I get that. But I recognize that God has already predestined what is to be, but he also puts us on a path where we have to make those decisions. And so the more I engage in ministry, the more I become more accountable of what I should be doing, and not just saying, well, I can't get it right all the time. I think accountability is important. And there's going to be some things that I don't do right that I'll get a black eye on. But you know what? That's part of growth.
Yeah.
As we look at the Bible, everybody in the Bible learned along the way. Some of those lessons learned did not fare out well, but the part of journeying with God is what makes the difference. And I want to be known as being true to God.
Amen. That's commendable, and I think something that all of us desire, to be known for that. All right, the question that you pulled, and this is going to look strange to those who are going to be watching these interviews, because everybody ends up getting it, but it's the Colbert questionnaire. I don't know if you ever watched the Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Periodically, he'll have a very prominent guest on and go through a series of questions called the Colbert questionnaire. So just say whatever comes to your mind. Apples or oranges?
Apples.
Best sandwich?
Chicken salad.
All right. Most used app on your phone?
The calculator. The calculator.
Okay. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Flight or road trip?
Flight.
Kind of depends on where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What's one thing you own that you really need to throw away?
Clothes.
All right. And what's one thing you must have if you were stranded on an island?
A good pair of shoes.
Okay, a good pair of shoes.
A good pair of shoes.
Okay. And you get one song to listen to for the rest of your life.
Lean on Me.
Okay. And describe the rest of your life in 5 words.
Decisions. Flexibility. God-fearing. Emotional. Trusting.
All right. Well, thank you, Pastor Howard Jenkins, for your time this morning. And we've enjoyed talking with you.
And thank you very much.
God bless you.
Thank you for this time.